Consider yourself a stranger from today. Don't come back. My mother's words, sharp as glass, echoed through the narrow hallway. Behind her stood my father, his arms folded, his silence even colder than her cruelty. I laughed then. A broken and trembling sound. I'm your daughter, I thought. But the door slammed shut before the word daughter could even leave my lips. The lock clicked. The key in my hand, still warm, had suddenly become nothing but useless metal, pressing my forehead against the wood. I prayed it would open again, that someone would say it was all a mistake, a terrible joke. Nothing. Just silence. Hi everyone, my name is Michelle. I'm 28. And in that moment, I learned the feeling of home spitting you out like an unwelcome guest. What do you call yourself when your own family erases your name? The hallway smelled of paint and dust. A neighbor peeked through her curtains, curiosity stitched across her face, but she said nothing. Shame burned its way down my throat. My bags were at my feet, heavy with clothes and books. Yet suddenly, I felt weightless, as if I were falling through some invisible hole in the world. I walked away, step by step, my shoes striking the pavement with a sound that was far too loud for someone who had just been made a ghost. That week stretched on like a wound that refused to close. I stayed in a friend's spare room, lying awake at night, staring at a ceiling that wasn't mine, rehearsing my parents' words again and again. Stranger, stranger, stranger. Then 1 week later, it happened. My phone buzzed. Not a message from my mother, or even my father. It was from their lawyer. The subject line screamed, urgent. We have a problem. Call immediately. I read it twice, 3 times. My chest thudded hard against my ribs. What problem? They had erased me, hadn't they? Locked me out. Abandoned me like trash. Why reach for me now? Staring at the email, my reflection trembled in the cracked screen. For the first time since the door slammed, I felt something other than pain, something sharper, steadier. They had cast me out. Now they needed me. And I was no longer the girl who begged at their doorstep. The key in my hand was useless that night, but I realized I was about to unlock something much greater. My thumb hovered over the call button, as if it were a trigger. 1 week ago, I stood outside my parents' locked door, begging for recognition. Now their lawyer was asking me to call immediately, as if I were still part of the family circle they'd shattered. I pressed it. Miss Michelle, a man's voice answered, clipped, professional, almost rehearsed. Your parents are in some difficulty. They instructed me to reach you. I let the silence hang there, sharp and heavy. My voice finally slipped through, calm but raw. It's strange, I said, because a week ago my parents told me I was nothing to them, a stranger. So why am I suddenly on your contact list? The lawyer hesitated. Papers shuffled in the background. There's a financial issue, a trust and asset transfer. It requires your signature. I smiled, though my chest ached. They'd erase me as their daughter, but legally they couldn't erase me. My name, carved into documents long before they decided to throw me away, had become a chain binding them back to me. Mr. Jacobs, I whispered, tasting each word like fire. Why don't you tell my parents that strangers don't sign papers? The silence on the other end was almost satisfying. I hung up. My phone felt heavier than before, buzzing with missed calls within minutes. Mom, Dad, even blocked numbers I didn't recognize. The same people who couldn't look me in the eye while slamming a door in my face were now desperate to hear my voice. That night, I lay awake again in my friend's spare room, staring at the ceiling. Only this time, I wasn't replaying their cruelty. I was replaying their desperation. I saw my father pacing the kitchen. The same kitchen where he once told me no one would ever want me. I imagined my mother wringing her hands, her eyes darting like a cornered animal's. They had built their lives on control. And I had been the obedient daughter, the one who cooked, who covered for their mistakes, who swallowed the humiliation. But they had cut me off. And when you sever something, sometimes it doesn't grow back. My phone lit up again. Another email, this time with documents attached. Their lawyer begging me to at least review them. I didn't click. Not yet. For the first time, I understood. Revenge doesn't always arrive with shouting. Sometimes it enters quietly, disguised as an unread email. And my silence was suddenly the loudest answer they'd ever received. The next morning, sunlight crept through thin curtains, but it didn't feel warm. My phone blinked on the nightstand like an impatient heartbeat. New messages, new subject lines. Please respond. We need your cooperation. Michelle, this is urgent. They weren't calling me daughter anymore. Just Michelle, like I was a business transaction. I finally opened the attachments. Legal documents spilled across my screen. Dense paragraphs, stamped seals, lines waiting for my signature. Words I didn't fully understand, but one line stopped me cold. Beneficiary Michelle Marie Caldwell. My name in bold, permanent, unshakable. I stared at it until my eyes blurred. For all the years they made me feel disposable, unworthy, invisible. Here it was in black ink. Proof that I mattered in a way they couldn't erase. And suddenly it all made sense. My parents hadn't just disowned me. They had miscalculated. Somewhere in their empire of property and pride, I was woven into the foundation. I was the signature they needed to keep it standing. I could almost see them. My father slamming his fist on the oak table, my mother clutching her pearls, both realizing their carefully built kingdom had a crack. And that crack was me. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the documents to a lawyer of my own, a friend's uncle who owed me a favor. He called within an hour. Michelle, he said, his tone sharp with interest, this isn't just urgent. This is leverage. If you play this right, they'll come crawling. Crawling. The word pulsed through me like a drumbeat. For years I crawled. I cooked Thanksgiving alone. I cleaned up their parties while my siblings laughed. I covered their debts with my savings when Dad's investments failed. And what was my reward? Being called a stranger? Not anymore. That evening, my parents' number flashed again. This time I answered. I wanted to hear it. Michelle. My mother's voice cracked, half command, half plea. We need to meet tonight. It's complicated. I let the silence linger just long enough for her to squirm. Then I said softly, I'm busy. Strangers don't rearrange their schedules for people who don't want them. I hung up before she could answer. For the first time, I didn't feel like the child left behind. I felt like the storm gathering on their horizon. And storms don't knock before they break the windows. By the third day of silence, the roles had shifted. My phone no longer felt like a leash. It felt like a stage. Every call, every email, every desperate voicemail was a performance I was suddenly directing. Then came the message that made me sit up. Subject, family dinner. Saturday night. Please come. A dinner. The same house where they once shoved me out was now offering me a seat again. I laughed so hard I startled my friend in the other room. Dinner? I whispered to myself. After calling me a stranger? I didn't reply right away. Instead, I imagined the table. Polished wood, crystal glasses, food plated to impress. My parents seated at the head. My siblings lined up like beautiful soldiers, and an empty chair. My chair. But this time, the chair wasn't theirs to give. It was mine to take. I called my lawyer again. He didn't sound surprised. They're not inviting you for reconciliation, Michelle. They're cornered. Don't go alone. Don't go unprepared. I thought about it all night. The betrayal, the slammed door, the useless key in my hand, but also the trembling in my mother's voice when she asked to meet. The sharp edge of fear underneath her pride. On Saturday, I dressed in silence. Not in humility, not in shame. A black dress, simple but sharp, paired with heels that clicked like thunder on pavement. My reflection looked nothing like the girl they cast out. When I arrived, the house glowed with golden lights, but I noticed something. The curtains were half drawn, as though the house itself was hiding. The door opened before I knocked. My father stood there. His tie was crooked, his eyes hollow. He didn't call me honey. Didn't call me daughter. He just stepped aside and muttered, "Come in." The air smelled of roasted meat and expensive wine. My siblings glanced up, surprise stitched across their faces. My mother sat at the table, her hands wrapped around a wine glass she hadn't touched. "Michelle," she said softly, almost rehearsed, "we're glad you came." I sat down, my back straight, my silence louder than any greeting, because I knew the truth. I wasn't here for dinner. I was here for the reckoning. And somewhere between the silverware and the silence, I planned to serve my own dish. Cold, steady, unforgettable. The clink of silverware was the only sound filling that long, suffocating dining room. Plates of lamb, bowls of roasted vegetables, glasses sweating with untouched wine. All of it laid out like a performance, but no one was eating. My siblings shifted in their seats, whispering with their eyes. My mother smiled too tightly, as if her face might crack under the weight of her own desperation. My father cleared his throat, a sound that once silenced entire rooms, but tonight it trembled. "Michelle," he began, his tone rehearsed but cracked at the edges. "We may have overreacted. Last week was emotional." Emotional. That was the word he chose for erasing me from the family, for slamming a door in my face, for making me stand with a useless key in my hand. Emotional. I leaned back, fingers tracing the rim of my water glass. "Overreacted," I repeated softly. "Is that what you call disowning your daughter? Throwing her out like trash?" My mother flinched. My father's jaw tightened. My siblings avoided my eyes. Finally, Mom spoke, her voice trembling with forced sweetness. "Michelle, darling, you know we didn't mean it like that. Families fight. But right now we need you. There are some documents." I cut her off, my tone sharper than any knife on that table. "The truth. This isn't about family. This is about money, about control, about you needing the signature of the stranger you created." The word hung in the air like smoke. My father slammed his hand against the table. "You don't understand what's at stake." I met his eyes, steady and cold. "No, I understand perfectly. What's at stake is everything you thought you could keep without me. And now suddenly I matter again." The room fell silent. My siblings froze, caught between loyalty and fear. My mother's hands shook around her wine glass. My father's face reddened, veins tight with a fury he couldn't unleash. For the first time, I felt taller than both of them. Not because I had power they wanted, but because I no longer needed theirs. I placed my napkin gently on the table, stood up, and let my heels echo against the polished floor. "I'll think about your little dinner invitation," I said quietly. "But remember this, strangers don't save families." And I walked out, leaving their perfect dinner untouched. The silence behind me was heavier than any slammed door, because this time I wasn't the one locked out. They were. The following morning, my inbox was flooded. More emails than I'd ever received from them in my entire life. Subject lines screamed urgency. "Michelle, please reconsider. The estate is at risk. We'll explain everything if you just come back." They were unraveling. And for once, I didn't feel the sting of rejection. I felt the steady hum of power. I forwarded every message to my lawyer. He called me within an hour. "Michelle," he said, calm but deliberate, "your parents are in deeper trouble than they've admitted. There's a trust fund tied directly to you. Without your consent, they lose access. That's why they're desperate." I leaned back in the chair, my pulse steady. So the daughter they disowned is the daughter holding their empire together. He paused, then said, "Exactly. They built walls around you, but the foundation runs through your name. They can't erase it." I spent the day walking through the city, my thoughts buzzing louder than the traffic. For years, I had carried their weight, paying off debts, swallowing their insults, cleaning up their messes. Now their kingdom was cracking, and they were the ones begging me to hold it steady. That night, my phone rang again. My father's voice, sharp and ragged. "If you don't sign, we could lose everything. Do you understand? Everything we've built gone." I closed my eyes, let his words hang there. Then I whispered, "You built it without me. You disowned me. Now you can live without me too." The silence that followed was thick, desperate. For once, I didn't feel it. When I hung up, I realized something vital. My revenge wasn't about shouting or slamming doors or burning bridges. It was about silence. It was about letting them sit in the echo of their own cruelty. And silence, I discovered, can be the loudest weapon of all. News travels fast in a small town. Within days, whispers turned into headlines. Caldwell estate in crisis. Family trust frozen pending beneficiary consent. Neighbors who once envied my parents now watched them with hungry eyes. The same people who praised our perfect family were suddenly dissecting every crack. And those cracks were widening. My brother cornered me outside a cafe, his face pale. "Michelle, please. You don't understand. Dad hasn't slept." Mom, she barely eats. They're falling apart. I sipped my coffee, steady calm. Did they think about me when they locked me out? When they called me a stranger? His lips parted, but no words came because he knew the answer. That evening, my lawyer updated me. They've tried everything. Emergency motions, loopholes, even pressure on the board. But it all leads back to you. Without your signature, they're finished. I walked past their house that night, the curtains drawn tight, lights flickering dim. For the first time, I saw it not as a fortress, but as a cage. My parents trapped inside by the very chains they forged. A memory surfaced. Me at 16, crying in that same kitchen after Dad told me I'd never amount to anything. My mother wiping the counter, ignoring my tears. Their love had always been conditional, their pride selective. And now they were the ones invisible, powerless, forgotten. I didn't knock. I didn't call. I simply walked past, the cool night air filling my lungs like freedom. The next morning, another headline hit. Caldwell assets seized pending investigation. My phone buzzed with missed calls, dozens of them, but I didn't answer. For once, I wasn't the one chasing, begging, explaining. They were collapsing, and I was finally gloriously still. The courthouse smelled of paper, polish, and fear. My parents sat across the aisle, shoulders hunched, faces pale. Once they were giants in every room. Now they looked small, like children caught in their own storm. The judge's voice carried steady authority. Without the beneficiary's consent, the trust remains frozen. Assets will be redistributed under state oversight. My father's head dropped into his hands. My mother whispered something to him, but her voice cracked like glass. Their empire, their control, their pride. It was slipping away in plain sight. When the session ended, they turned toward me. My mother's eyes glistened. "Michelle," she whispered, reaching out like I was still her child. "Please help us. We're family." That word, family, hit me like an echo from the past. Family when they locked me out. Family when they called me a stranger. Family when they shut the door in my face. I stepped closer, not with anger, but with clarity. My voice was quiet, steady. No. Family shows up when you're broken. Family doesn't lock you outside with a useless key in your hand. You taught me what family isn't. And today, I finally learned what family is. Me choosing myself. Her hand trembled in the air, waiting for me to take it. I didn't. I turned, my heels striking against the marble floor. Every step sounding like the closing of a chapter. Outside, sunlight spilled across the courthouse steps. Warmth touched my skin. And for the first time in years, it felt like it belonged to me. I paused, inhaled deeply, and smiled, not at their downfall, but at my own release. Their cruelty no longer defined me. Their desperation no longer chained me. They had called me a stranger, and now I finally was one. By choice.